All right. Hello, hello, and welcome in to another episode of Totem Talks. Here I am with Nick
Hey,
as
how
we
you
sit
doing?
down and record season 5, episode 3.
That's right. This one's gonna hurt
Yes, it's going to hurt. And it did, in fact, cause me pain.
in so many different
And we'll,
ways.
we'll get into why and how, but I was in pain for parts of this.
Sometime.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever be the same, to be honest.
Yeah, is it no great loss there?
How's everybody doing today? Geez, just what a week it's been. What a week
Sure.
it has been, man.
It's been
I already
hot, I'll tell you
told
that.
I already told you, Nick, that this week was super out of schedule for me
Yeah.
because I normally I like my job that I can listen to audio while I'm working very easily.
hmm
I work from home, and so normally I have no problem getting the music done, getting the 9 albums done for the
Sure.
week. It's pretty easy. What a week, what a week.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
This week, we're training for a new project, and so I only could listen outside of work hours because I was on conference calls and Zooms and Teams and all the fun stuff for the week. And of course, luck would have it, these are three artists who just released the longest albums.
So long.
Like multiple albums over an hour long.
Correct.
And just it was a little stressful for me, especially since we record on Thursday, so
Of course.
I didn't have a ton of time.
Right.
But I did it. I got through it.
We're
I
proud
made
of
it
you.
work, and I survived. And
Excellent.
honestly, I feel good about it. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, before Nick, you tell us who we're doing and everything,
Right. Of course.
I just want to remind everybody that if you enjoy listening to us here at Totem Talks, you should tell us. You should like it. You should comment. You should subscribe. You should follow us on Twitch, where we stream live every Thursday, including right now. Hello, people that are watching as we stream live. Except I'll tell you right now, for people streaming live, we're not here next Thursday.
Great
For
point.
people on the audio recording, that means nothing because this is weeks
Yeah,
in
it
the
means
future.
nothing to you.
We may be here this Thursday coming up. You never know. But you'll know if you follow our socials, which are kind of still integrated with our band Low Totem. Working on that's probably going to be my project this season. Alex, our lovely sometimes guest host, did go through and create a few different socials for actual Totem Talks. So I just have to take those over and actually start using them. But
Excellent.
now that we're getting video and stuff with our audio, it should be a lot simpler to do actually make content for those, which is
I believe you.
exciting. It's exciting, honestly, because that's was the thing holding me back from going into those socials. Is like, what am I going to post? A picture of the artist we did this week.
Right?
But now
Yeah.
with like video, I can post clips. I can post fun stuff. I can post
Mhm.
pictures of Nick's nipples, which
Yeah,
is
I mean,
all the con. I mean, honestly, Nick, I'm sure we could pretty much see them right now with the lack of sleeves on that shirt.
you're not gonna get me to start wearing sleeves.
I would never
So,
want you to wear
no.
sleeves. Those shoulders
Not
are too
changing who I
tight.
am.
But Nick, why don't you tell us who we listened to this week,
Oh
please? Because
gosh,
I
I would
forget.
love to. It was quite a diverse week, but
It was.
also, uh, especially after last week where we had a couple of artists who were definitely on the lower end of the cultural impact side, a super influential week. I'd say all three of the artists we're covering this week were definitely vital in the development of their respective genres. So we're kicking things off with Pete Seeger, and then we are moving on to Siouxsie and the Banshees, and then rounding things out with 9 Inch Nails.
Yes,
So there we are.
that's all of them. That's correct. Correct, Mundo. And we'll kick it off with Pete Seeger now.
Yeah, tell us about them.
So Peter Seeger. I want to let you know Pete was short for Peter.
Thank you.
He was an American folk singer and social activist. He was active all the way from 1939 until his passing in 2014. So, yeah,
Yeah,
20, 20 years old to 94 years old.
that's
The
a
man
solid
was
run.
active. Yeah, it was quite a solid run. So the three albums that we covered for the most part is American Banjo from 1944, then American Industrial Ballads from 1956, great names,
Indeed.
and then At 89 from 2008.
Correct.
I can't wait till I have one comment about At 89, and it infuriated me. And so
Interesting.
I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Okay. All right.
But
I'm
you go
excited.
first with American
Sure.
Banjo.
I would love to. So, first things first, this is 1944. Uh, we had maybe a little bit of a hard time finding some background on this record. I was able to find one source that gave me a list of 4 tracks that it said, American Banjo was these 4 songs. So I was able to find all 4 of those songs on YouTube and
Yeah.
listen to them. I don't necessarily know that they were the 1944 recordings of them, or if they were, excuse me, re-recorded or live recorded at a later date. But I listened to the songs, and that's what matters. Um, and the quality is a little rough because it's a lot of still early stuff, even when if it
Yeah.
wasn't the original from the album. But I'll tell you what, despite the bad quality, what definitely shines through on these 4 tracks is Pete Seeger has a nice voice, and Pete Seeger can play the hell out of that banjo. Like, he's a really good banjo player. Um, and so that was cool. All the 4 songs that he chose here were covers to start his career. Um, but one traditional that I'll just throw out there that I really enjoyed was his version of Erie Canal. So, you know, you take it for what it is. It's 4 traditional songs. It's 1944. You're just not gonna hear with the same quality that you would get anytime like a few decades after that. But there's potential for an artist here. There's potential for an artist.
Yeah. Listen, I agree. I mean, it's 4 songs. It's hard to really get a strong bass line. And you take a lot of things with multiple grains of salt when you're dealing with this era of music. The early recorded era of music, the 40s. You're gonna. I'm trying to think. It really makes you take for granted, or it really makes you realize how much you take for granted music today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so much like, which I mean, maybe honestly it should be because there's so much like, I could sit down today in GarageBand and make a song that
Sure. Right.
sounds 100 times better
Mm-hmm.
audibly
Totally.
than what they could come up with in their best studios.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you think maybe that's too much power for the average person. I hear some of the music coming out today. But no, listen, it's good. It's good stuff. He's a decent singer. Folky in a good way. We like folk here. And I have no complaints about the 4 songs. So I'm going to take us into American Industrial Ballads, which is, it just immediately invokes, like, if you look at the album cover, it invokes what he's singing about. And that, we'll get into that, I'm sure, a little more, just how much of an activist Pete Seeger
Mm-hmm.
constantly was. But this is literally exactly what it says. It's an album about the industrial workers, farmers, textile workers, factory workers, and them doing all this hard work and getting completely robbed of, equal pay and fair share by the quote unquote rich fat cats, basically the captains of industry. The captains of industry.
Yes.
And Message wise, loved it. Music wise, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to it for what it was. It was about 50 minutes. Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. There was multiple times throughout this album where I had no idea the song changed.
Sure. Yeah.
Just very similar sound. Like taking it from an audio standpoint, there's a lot of similarities. The songs are also quick. Like there's
Yeah.
like a minute to 2 minutes. I think the longest song was like
4 minutes. There's
about four
one 4
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, it's good stuff, message wise. Again, he's a decent vocalist. He's not winning awards vocally. The banjo is fun to listen to. I've always found the banjo is an instrument that complements very well, but it is the main prize for a 50 minute album. Okay. He's good. I mean, he
Feel
plays
tired
it
of it.
well.
Yeah.
He plays it
Definitely.
well, but it's
Hmm.
just like you don't get the same ring that you get with like a
Sure.
guitar, the same richness in body.
Okay.
Like a banjo is
Yeah.
like twangy on purpose.
Oh, yeah. I totally get
And as a complement in a sound, it's really good.
that. Hmm.
As the main sound, sometimes it gets a little much to my ear.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. And I felt like the banjo playing was maybe a little less complex on this record, although not bad. It
Yeah,
just like wasn't the focus as much anymore. And I think that's because of everything that you were saying. He shifted from like his arrangements of traditional songs where he's trying to show off his talents and, why his version of the song merited listening to versus the 500 versions. But now he's writing these songs, and like you said, he's writing them about labor. He's writing them about industrialization, the way that you know changed people's lives.
yeah,
And like you said, that's very good. I think 90% of what he had to say on this record still makes perfect sense um, to discuss. Here we
even
are,
more so honestly today, which
over
is
60
just
years later, right? Um,
isn't that like before I'm gonna let you finish,
sure.
obviously. I really want to find folk songs from like the early 50s that just don't relate to today. That I'm like,
Yeah, you just be
we
like, oh no, we
solved
solved
that
that, right?
problem. Like, but I
Nah,
never do. Every time we
we've
listen to them, I'm like,
right.
oh my God, is
Yeah.
the world just awful? Like, I hate
Yep.
it.
Yeah, which reminds me, what you've been talking about his voice. He sounds a little bit like Phil Oakes, or maybe Phil Oakes sounds a little bit like Pete Seeger, really.
Uh,
Um,
it's 6 of 1. Yeah.
yeah, and Seeger actually covers a bunch of Phil Oakes songs on some of his later records too.
There's
Um,
one very distinct difference between the two of them for me that we'll get into later. But
sure. Um, but I'll comment on just like one song in particular here, which was "My Children Are Seven in Number," which
yeah,
I just absolutely
which
that
is the
was the
4 minute
long
song.
one. But it's "My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean," except for it's like a
Yeah.
worker's anthem instead,
My children are
about
7 in
just
number.
totally unable to provide for his family. But anyway, now let's just zoom ahead
Okay.
many
At
decades.
89,
Hold on.
water break.
I'm having a pat moment
It's
because I
important to
ate
hydrate.
I ate a small handful of peanuts like
Mm-hmm.
about 45 minutes ago, and now very scratchy throat constantly, and I can't talk.
Don't jinx me, man. I feel great.
Okay, sorry.
I'm
So at
feeling
89.
smooth and velvety.
So this is different. It's not different, but it is. There's a lot more going on in terms of style. It is partially a lot of the same folk songs with the same approach, but it is also partially spoken word with different like introductions and like short discussions from Pete about subjects of the songs. Sometimes, between them all, there are other guest vocalists that appear, choirs that come in. But I'll say this: for all of the songs that Pete Seeger still does sing on here, for 89 years old, man, I couldn't have asked for more out of his voice. You just can't really expect anyone to be 89 years old and still like very passive. Like he's hitting notes and singing melodies,
Yeah.
and it's like, hey man, great. Um, he still has some good banjo chops. There were a few little instrumental ditties in here too that were nice. There were the choral arrangements that I mentioned before were pretty interesting. You definitely got some they weren't just like straight 3 or 4 chord songs as folk tends to be without any kind of like clash or dissonance. You definitely got that in there. Um, and there's some pieces that I would definitely say are like beautiful little pieces on here. It was a heartfelt record. It was a record that he put out, you know, with meaning, with love.
Yeah.
But at times it was also like a little like silly and almost for kids too. Um, like particularly the song I want to say it was just called "Fat Little Baby,"
Oh,
which was
yeah.
I was a little bit laughing out loud at that one.
Little
Oh,
fat
little
baby.
fat baby, yeah. But you know, for an hour or whatever it was, or maybe it was only 50 minutes,
48 minutes.
but it was 32 songs, like with all that. So it was definitely more of an art project than just an album song for song all the way through. And I think it was a fine approach for him to take at that age. It was fun.
Okay. So, yes to all of that. I'm not going to lie. I actually like full on like snort laughed so the first 3 songs happen. Nameless banjo riff, false from true, and now he sit us down. And I'm thinking the same things you are. Like, okay, I mean, he sounds much older, obviously. The voice is still hitting what it needs to hit, but only because they are keeping it in a tight box
Right.
of where it needs to be. And then I just hear, "Hey guys, it's Pete Seeger here," and I'm like, "What? What?" And then throughout the rest of them, every couple songs, he's just like, "I got to tell you about how I wrote this song or the story," and I'm like, I like it. It's very documentary
Mhm.
styled. I was not expecting it at
Right.
all. But here's my biggest gripe. I was infuriated when I heard this. The album's called At 89. Okay. Pete Seeger's first speech, first sentences. "Hey guys, 88-year-old Pete Seeger here." It's like,
Oh yeah,
really? Really? You couldn't
he
just name it
recorded
at
that one while
88?
he was
You
88.
couldn't just name it at 88 then? You
You're
say
right.
the age you are in one of the things, Pete.
You're right. You're right. I heard it too, and it
It
bugged me.
bugged me.
But
It bugged me so bad. I was like, it's just such a small thing. Like, why?
lie somewhere.
Regardless. My favorite song on the album, because it's been stuck in my head since I listened to it on Tuesday. "If it can't be reduced, if it can't
Oh
be
yeah,
reduced, reused or recycled, reused." It is the cheesiest
it is.
line. It's the cheesiest song. And it's got that full on like it ba ba da 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 and then like a
Hmm.
chorus of people ba da 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 the
Yeah,
whole time.
definitely
So
one of the
yeah,
ones I felt was
if it,
aimed more towards like kids music, children's music.
yes, if it can't be reduced is the name of that song. I highly recommend it. You will laugh. But that's all I've got for this.
Okay.
It's okay. I mean, listen, Pete Seeger is what he is. We're gonna give him some
Right.
scores here. He is what he
We are
is.
correct. Okay.
So grading wise,
Here we go.
uh,
Shall I just get into a bunch of things?
yeah. I mean, here's what's gonna happen now.
Okay.
Nick,
Yeah.
talk me out of a 1.
Okay. Sure.
Talk me up
Well,
from a
I
1.
would
Give
love
me
to.
things.
So, first of all, he is in the Songwriters Hall of Fame class of 1972, so he
Perfect.
automatically gets that one.
You.
He is, of
Yep.
course, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in
Perfect.
1996, so that puts him at a minimum of a 4.
Yep.
And then he won the Eugene Debs Award. He won the Letelier Moffat Human Rights Award, the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, National Medal of the Arts for the National Endowment for the Arts, the Kennedy Center Honor, the Harvard Arts Medal. Um, he's won a bunch of Grammys for his records, of course. Um, let's see. There's a bunch of other things. the George Peabody Medal, which is the highest honor bestowed by the Peabody Institute at Johns Hopkins University for people who have made exceptional contributions to music in America. Um, he's won a million prizes for both his music and his activism. Um, and of course, not to before Pete Seeger was famous as a solo artist, he was also a founding member of two of the most crucial folk singing groups of the 40s in the Almanac Singers and the Weavers. So he
Yep.
founded two of the most important folk groups way back when, and then obviously had some success as a solo artist as well.
Great. I did
So
know
have I
those things. I
talked you
wasn't
out of?
actually at a one.
No,
You
I
did
I
talk me out of a
understand.
one. Because I feel like a lot of people may not know him by name.
Right,
He was a product of an era,
of course.
but he has firmly implemented himself in the world in his legacy. Now, I don't think we're giving him like crazy high score here, but I legitimately think for the amount of things he's contributed to, the amount of legacy that he has, he's over a five.
Oh, easy.
Yeah, but I mean, for somebody who doesn't have a name like currently,
Sure.
I'm
I mean,
that's
I
an
think
impressive feat.
yeah. I mean, he's was definitely a big name for many decades, though. I don't want to. And his legacy is like when he died, it was President Obama at the time spoke about it
So I was just about to say,
and
like,
like all sorts of stuff. Like he was like he. I mean, during the whole McCarthy era, like he was
yeah.
one of the people who was majorly targeted. Like he was a
How do
big
we
deal
feel?
in and out of music.
How do we feel about giving him a six?
I feel like it's kind of low. I feel like it's
I feel
kind of
like it's
low.
kind of low.
I
I
mean,
don't think I can go all the way to a seven.
as far as solo artists in really in any genre of music in like blues and folk, I mean, there are a handful of people who have whose impact has really stood the test of time, and I think Seeger is one of those people. Like in the pre-Dylan era, Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger are the first two names I think of as
Sure.
folk artists that like really influenced everything that was to come.
Okay. What number would you be giving?
I would definitely have been closer to that seven at least. I think. I think the
So you would
only
have.
reason that I would be going down to like a seven is because of, it's been a long time since folk has been a really primary
Sure.
mainstream genre, but it's still important to be one of the most important people in your genre, regardless of whatever it is.
Let's give him a 6.8.
Okay.
I'm comfortable there. But before we go on, I read. So you mentioned the Barack Obama thing, and I read it.
Yeah.
Political opinions aside, we're not talking politics here.
No.
I forgot how good of either him or his ghostwriter, whoever he used,
The
was.
speechwriters.
My gosh, man! Like some of the stuff, like he basically says, over the years, Pete used his voice and his hammer to strike blows for workers' rights and civil rights, world peace and environmental conservation, and he always invited us to sing along. For reminding us where we come from and showing us where we need to go, we will always be grateful to Pete Seeger. Like,
Yeah, I think
it,
that sums it up really nicely.
I feel like while he was in office, like I remember noticing that I was like, he gives really good speeches. Like his speeches are much better than I've heard. And I
Some
mean, I
people
guess
have a knack for public speaking.
I guess it also happened like again, the people he was sandwiched between maybe weren't the best speech givers, so that kind of
Yeah, that's also a
it
very
kind
fair point.
of showcased it a
A
little
little
more to
less
me.
eloquent.
But it was just I like it literally stuck out. As I read that in his legacy thing on the Wikipedia, I was like, I remember how like just good at speeches,
Sure.
regardless of anything else you agree or disagree with about Barack Obama. His speeches were good.
Now,
But let's move on to the body of the breadth of work here.
yes. And there are 52 studio albums.
Okay, so 52. I guess the closest you can come is 8 times, a little more than 8 times. So 8.5 times our average,
So
which would be putting him at like a
40-ish.
42 and a half.
All right, I'll type it in. Now, I can't find solid numbers on sales, and I think that has a lot to do with how early on a lot of these records were put out.
Yeah,
I don't know if you found anything,
I
but I
didn't
mean,
find
I'm
anything.
going to assume that they're fine. That they're I'm
I'm
not
going
going
to
to like
assume they're okay.
they're fine. And
Yeah,
I'm going to basically say whatever we think 52 albums worth of music is worth is the score that he's going to get.
I mean, here's the thing. We have talked for ad nauseum basically about the process of diminishing returns.
Sure, of course.
Like, for instance, if you have 6 albums, you're on the average,
Hmm.
and they've all sold platinum, you're going to do better than somebody with 45 or more albums that none of which certified. It's just a matter of that's the formula. Like, quantity is more often than not bested by quality on our show, which it needs to be.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not knocking the quality of Pete Seeger's albums, even though, I mean, they're not supposed to be virtuosic musical testaments.
Correct.
They're all about message. Like folk artists, it's very rare to have a folk artist who is both a phenomenal singer songwriter and getting their message across and selling well. Like, they don't all, like, it's not
Sure.
all in one package usually. But I'm comfortable here. I mean, I don't want to go too high just
No,
because
but
there's 50 albums.
has to be
But because the
it
other
has to
thing
be
is there's
solid.
a number of covers as well,
Sure.
which
Which
especially in the
we'll
early stuff.
yeah, we'll talk about more so later.
Right. Uh I mean, I'd be
I mean,
fine going like I'd be in like the mid sixes personally.
and that's fine. That's fine by
Yeah.
me. I'd go with like a 6-6.
Okay.
And then move on. Instrumental is not the strongest. Uh
No, he's
I
good.
thought
He's a good banjo player.
yeah, I thought the impressiveness playing went down from the first
Yeah.
to the second album. But there were definitely moments on that third album where he showed he could definitely still play in his late 80s, like, and
Yeah.
play banjo very well.
It's impressive.
Yeah, so I mean,
Listen, I think that would be above average. I think his vocals are a little below average, personally.
sure,
Um,
I don't hold any.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they're like a 1, but they're probably like a 4.6, a little below average because we're not comparing him just to folk artists. We're comparing him to
No, of
other
course.
artists as well. And I think all that kind of boils down to right around like a 4.9 to a 5.1 range.
And so, do you want me to give him the 5?
I
I
mean,
mean,
whichever one of those 3 numbers you believe in.
all right. I'm gonna give him the 5. I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna sit the fence. I
I
am the
can't believe you've done
I'm the
this.
best fence sitter. Okay, now, and you mentioned there are covers and traditionals mixed in here, but again, a lot of that is not what he's known for. A lot of his impact and legacy is in those many albums in which he was writing all original work and a meaningful original work too. Um, but I
Right. I
do
like
think
this.
that the arrangements are relatively simple. I mean, I would say his poetic talent is probably going to score him higher than his songwriting talent. In other words, you know, keeping in mind the era and how much
Yeah.
music has changed, and what folk and rock compositions were 60, 70 years ago versus what they are now, and at least keeping that in mind, I still think that maybe these are just pretty very basic, simple, like one instrument
Yeah.
and a lot. Like I'm not going to give a lot here for songwriting, but I'm not going to knock him because the songs he wrote were really important,
Yeah.
and that's the
But
line I'm trying to tell.
we're gonna knock him a little bit. I'm sorry.
I mean, like I'm not going to give him a bad score, but I'm not going
I'm
to give
not
him a
gonna
good
give him
score
I'm
either.
not gonna give him a bad score,
No,
but I'm not gonna give him a good score. I mean, they're
sure,
they're very simple,
totally.
and especially in that last album when you got to hear him talk, a lot of it was like, Yeah, I took Beethoven and wrote a
Yeah,
song on Beethoven, which
right.
is cool, but it's not your music.
Sure.
And all right, it's
What do you
below
want?
average.
I was gonna say in the fours.
I'm okay with being in the lower half of the fours. Like a 4-4 is fine with me.
And that he shall receive. And then I think poetic is better. And I don't think that there's anything like elaborate to the poems. I don't think
If
they're
it can't be
particularly groundbreaking.
reduced,
No, but they all had
reused and
important.
recycled.
He had very important messages to get across,
Okay,
especially in
so
the
this
middle
is
part of his career. Obviously, like we covered his very beginnings, and then him like just being a very old man and having fun. But that middle part of his career in the 50s and early 60s, where he was like actively being blacklisted by everyone for all of his activities and the songs he was writing, like those are the songs, like those are the points here.
here's where he's gonna get points from me, and then here's where he's not gonna get points from me. He's gonna get points from me because he was very like slapping your face, like you suck, and I'm telling you to your face that you suck. That's awesome.
Sure.
In
Yeah.
it's, I love to see it. I love to see people legitimately use their platform for messages like that.
Right.
To be like, listen, I'm telling you what you can do better and what needs to change.
Sure.
So I give him a lot of props for that. What I take away from is you specifically compared him not lyrically, but to Phil
Sure.
Oakes.
Hmm.
And that's where he's different because unlike a Phil Oakes, he wasn't smiling in your face and stabbing you in the back lyrically.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
There was no nuance to his lyrics.
Sure.
So like there has to come a point here where it's like I can love the subject matter of what you're talking about. Like again, I'm not comparing him to Bon Jovi either. But like where Bon Jovi had that last album where they were like, "Oh, I love your messages," but like you shouldn't have written these because they're very
Yeah.
bad.
Right.
I think he's like somewhere in the middle of that.
I agree with
It's
you.
very simple lyrics for the most part. He's not
Right.
exactly, even though I like his message, like yeah, people are workers are exploited. I'm glad you're singing about it, but like you're not. I don't know. You're not turning over a leaf that nobody knows is there.
Sure.
And then you're not doing it in a super clever way.
I agree.
So like for those are kind of knocks for me.
Yeah, I agree. At the end of the day, it's an above average score. It has.
It's an above average score for sure. But I'm saying like those
It's
are the
not
things that
astronomical,
keep
I
him
agree.
out of like folk artists more than anyone have the ability on our podcast to score very high in this category. But I like Pete Seeger's not going to do that.
No.
But I think Pete Seeger's very easily going to be in like the high fives.
Sure. I
You
would
know?
even give him a 5.8, and then
Okay.
X Factor.
So
I think there's discussion to be had, right?
there's discussion to be had. I mean, as you mentioned, like being in two extremely influential folk or starting two extremely influential folk artists or the Almanac
Right.
Singers and the Weavers, his extreme legacy.
Oh, he also has a forever stamp that either came out this year or is coming out this year, issued by the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay. Yeah. I also just find it interesting that when he passed away, or I'm sorry, not when he passed away, before he passed away and one after he passed away, like multiple people have tried and failed to name bridges after Pete Seeger.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that.
Like, I just
Keep trying, folks.
I just don't understand. Whatever. So the one was the walkway over the Hudson.
Yeah.
They were trying to name that after Pete Seeger. It's not. And then the Tappan Zee Bridge they were trying to apply his name to that over the Hudson again. And that is instead called the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge.
Whoops.
Yeah. Whoopsie. So, I don't know. But there's some cool stuff. There's like Seeger Fest that took place in 2014.
Nice.
That was a free memorial to Pete Seeger, including people like Harry Belafonte,
Right.
Rusted Root, which we did.
Yeah,
Well, we didn't do them. Did we do Rusted Root?
we did.
We did. I couldn't remember. It's been so long.
Clearly.
They sent me on my way. But like, so there's some cool stuff here.
Definitely.
I'm good giving him a full half a point
Okay.
for his legacy.
Right.
Are you less than that? Or are you
do
more
it.
than that?
I was thinking maybe a little bit more than that.
Well, talk to me about it, man. Walk me through why.
I don't know. I mean, I think we named like 10 different honors and different things. But if you're not going to.
I'll tell you what. I'll give him 0.5 for everything. And then
Okay.
because my father is a postal worker, I will give you a full 0.3 for the forever stamp to give
I
him a
love it.
0.8.
Now we're talking.
Yep.
And now we can move on to Siouxsie and the Banshees.
Siouxsie and the Banshees were a British rock band formed in London in 1976 by vocalist Siouxsie Sioux and bass guitarist Stephen Severin. And they were active from 1976 to 1996. And then what I'm assuming is a reunion concert in 2002.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That makes sense to me as well. And we covered 3 albums from Siouxsie and the Banshees. We started with The Scream, which came out in 1978. We followed that up with Kaleidoscope from 1980. And then we wrapped things up with The Rapture from 1995. And
Yes.
It's my turn to go first.
Very good.
Let me give you a little bit of background. And then I think you'll know what I think based on my background. This is 70s British post-punk. That's the background I'm giving you. Listen. I had problems with this album. The one thing I liked about this album, it was only 39 minutes long. That was awesome. Remember how I said albums were long this week?
They were.
This was not one of them. This was a quick one. And here's what else I'll say. This wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible music that I hated. It was not great. I'm not going to listen to it again. It felt like they were both trying to push the envelope and also playing extremely safe, which is a weird line to dance on. I felt like musically they weren't really doing anything wild and crazy, but also trying to make me feel like they were. Also, they did a cover of Helter Skelter that, sure, congratulations, you did a cover of Helter Skelter. That is a cover that I received no blisters on my fingers for. Nor did I believe the drummer of that song received any blisters. Because the entire album just felt weirdly safe. Vocally, Siouxsie is okay. I mean, it's post-punk. The melody is literally the least important part about that. It's practically like the entire thing is basically right here, but if I was a girl, like that's what the most of it is. So while I didn't hate it, I certainly didn't enjoy it.
Okay.
And that is my opinion. And now it's your turn.
Okay. So I wasn't really sure what to think coming in because I knew Siouxsie and the Banshees because I know they're a very important act in the development of like the end of the punk, beginning of the post-punk era. So I knew their influence. I definitely knew that we've covered several artists already who were heavily influenced by this record, like The Cure, probably like The Pretenders, a handful of other bands in that vein.
Jesus and Mary Chain was one of their influence people, which I feel like just gives you a lot of information on how I felt, and hopefully how you felt.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Jesus and Mary Chain, but I didn't hate this album. I actually I liked it-ish.
You
It's
liked it ish?
definitely here. It is the type of punk adjacent music that I could probably get into and like passively enjoy listening to. It like there's
Fascinating.
nothing about it that I was like, oh, that's weird. You know, there were some things like that I think are baked into the cake of the genre, like having the vocals a little bit lower than maybe normal in the mix, but they're not supposed to be as forward as they are with other types of music. So I felt like that was all very intentional choice. At the end of the day, it was kind of an interesting album, mostly because I'm like, I totally hear the influence. Like it was one of those
Sure.
clear cases of, we've listened to enough music that came after this. I knew who the artist was, but never listened to any of their music. And then I heard the record and I was like, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. Like I totally get what happened to music after this.
Right.
And so I could take it or leave it. And that's, I think, high praise for this genre and us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's why don't you
yeah.
why don't you talk to us about
I
Kaleidoscope,
would
Nick?
I would love to. So a few of the band members have changed now. So it's still, as you mentioned, Siouxsie Sue and Steven Severin. But we've got Budgie now on the drums. And I'm
Great
not even
name,
going to
Budgie.
try. It is a great name. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the guitar player's last name.
John McGuck.
Megach. All right, that's fine. Um, and it's different. Like the fact that there are two new musicians in the band, I think, makes a clear impact on what the music does. It felt like without being complex, it was experimental, at least at times. I kind of left this album thinking this is not the kind of album you can fully make up your mind about after one listen. It definitely gave me I might have to listen to this like 5 times to fully get it and say, okay, I hate it, or okay, I like it. It definitely like left, which maybe that's a good thing to leave you with the feeling of like, well, I have to at least listen to this again to fully kind of wrap my mind around my opinion of it. Um, but it also had some cool stuff and some weird stuff. So like for instance, Christine I thought was maybe the best song, but it also had some of the most absurd lyrics that were very weird. But it was like super accessible compared to a lot of the other stuff on the album, and like you could get into the music pretty easily. And then there was the song Red Light, which I don't know if you caught this because I guess I can't be 100%, but it sounded to me like they were using um, what's a camera shutter sound as their percussion
Yeah.
throughout that song, which super creative and interesting to me. Like you hear something like that and you're like, oh my God, is that like a camera shutter that they used and they recorded the sound and so that kind of thing is always interesting to kind of pick out.
Yeah, interesting that you picked the two songs that Severin wrote the lyrics for and most of the song for,
Yeah, go figure.
because he wrote Christina and Red Light. So I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I agree with most of what you said. Much more experimental sounding, much more like psychedelic in nature at times. It's classified as neo psychedelia, and I get that.
Okay.
In the fact that like by psychedelic they just mean we're throwing stuff at the musical wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Um, and I understand your thought process of like it's more complex, so it requires more listens to see if I like it.
Yeah.
I don't need more listens to see if I like it. I thought that this is again another album where while I didn't actively hate it, I'm not rooting against Siouxsie and the Banshees at this point.
Right.
However, it's so far from a genre of music that I enjoy, and none of the songs struck me at all in a way that I would
Sure.
want to listen to them again. Like to be this far out of my comfort zone, like, and don't get me wrong, I have a lot of songs and artists that are not in my comfort zone that I love to listen to. Country artists, rap artists, even punk, post punk, like where it's like, oh, but you're doing something to it that is palatable to me.
Hmm.
And I just feel like That's not what's happening here. Siouxsie is yet again decent vocal. Um, probably probably the best vocal of the week.
Could be.
Could be, but at the same time, like I'm not going out of my way to listen to any of these songs again. I don't think I
Understandable.
need that to know how I feel about them.
Fair enough.
But I'll go into Rapture. So Rapture is again a little different. So
Yeah.
this is I feel like we've left the post punk area and we're more in like a alt rock
Mhm.
situation, which is a lot better for me genre wise. I like alt rock. I like rock and alt rock. And that just goes to show you that you could be wrong about stuff. Because I did not enjoy this album at all either. Um, so maybe I really just think that the sound that they combined to make is just a sound that doesn't work for me. And I guess it makes sense because most of the artists that was influenced by this band, I also don't like.
Right.
So like I'm very consistent in artists that have stemmed from this sound and create the sound, or artists that I don't like. But at least Budgie is still here.
Yeah, love that. But other
Um,
members have changed.
Other
John
members have
McGough
changed.
has been
Yeah,
replaced
John
by two
McGough
people.
has gone. He's been replaced by John Klein, a much easier name to pronounce.
Indeed.
Um, but yeah, I don't know what else to really say. Like, I'm not actively hating them. I feel like in other weeks I would have actively hated them, but I feel like this week I had a different perspective
Mm.
of I was so crunched for time that while it maybe made me start more negatively, like I was like, instead of listening because I wanted to listen, I was like, I have 40 minutes and I
Yeah.
can listen.
I get you.
The one thing I hated about this album was that it was 54 minutes
Yeah.
long.
Sure.
Come on, Siouxsie.
Well,
But that's about it. And the Rapture, the 11 and a half minute song, that's track number 10. So if you're listening to this, go ahead and just skip that one. I know it's the title track, and I know Nick might talk about how much he loves it. But if
yes.
you're crunched for time, skip it.
Interesting. Okay. So I thought this was arguably their most consistent record.
Sure.
Um, Again, different, like you said, different, but maybe like it didn't have some of the on and off of the first record and the second record. I mostly had the same neutral-ish to like intrigued opinion about most of the songs.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, I'll say two more things about this basically. One, because enough time has passed and we're in the 90s now, I have heard this band uh, create music that would influence a bunch of other bands I've listened to. And now I've heard this band influence those bands and then listen to the bands that they've influenced and then brought that kind of back into their own music. If you
Yeah.
see what I mean, like you can
Yeah.
hear all these other bands like The Cure and The Pretenders that were popular in the 80s that kind of would have been either contemporaries or coming after from this group. And then you can hear that they listen to their records. And that's at least interesting to me from you know, a musicologist perspective, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and then the last thing I was going to say is the title track is by far the best song. Uh,
Because you're basic, Nick.
no,
Because you're just super basic.
Pat, like
Nick,
I'm honestly shocked you didn't say, because here's the thing. I didn't care about anything that happened in that 11 and a half minutes except for the multiple beautiful orchestral string sections. Like the first minute and a half was my favorite minute and a half of their discography. And then there were like, I'm shocked that you didn't say the one with all these beautiful orchestral sections was my favorite after all these things you didn't like. You're like,
all right.
oh, the one that had all the things that I like in it. I didn't like that one. Skip that one.
All right. I'm gonna,
Like, come on.
I'm gonna, this is a safe space. I'm going to get real with you.
Okay.
I didn't want you to know that I liked the long song.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't let you live with that. You forced it out of me.
It was the best one, right?
Well, it was the only one that was. It was the only one that was really palatable for me.
Okay.
Like, regardless of that, like, which I guess in fact made me like it more because every other song took a genre that I really enjoy and just produced songs in that genre that I didn't love or like really or want to hear again. And then this song didn't try to be that and instead was just a different genre entirely with the orchestral pieces. And I really enjoyed listening to it. And in fact, I would argue, in my true soul of a self, this is an 11-minute and 30-second album of good music.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I knew that if I went super hard against it, you would immediately talk about it, and then I could reveal my truth. I wanted to make you defensive about it.
Yeah, I was defensive about it. Okay, let's grade them.
Cool. They're influential. I get it. Her name is spelled interestingly. I get it. Let's give them like a 4. I don't know. If you have another number.
I could have talked about it a little bit more. I was going to say that's fine. But I mean, like, just the variety of groups, like, because I mentioned a few specifically where the through lines were a little bit clearer. But I was going to say the Smiths, Radiohead, REM, Sonic Youth, even
Joy
like
Division.
Yeah, U2, Jane's Addiction. Like, there are a lot of groups that drew inspiration. And
did you know,
they admired Siouxsie and the Banshees.
Jane's Addiction and Jane's Addiction, M&M's.
I was never gonna guess that. I really thought it was something else.
Real sweet tooth on that Jane.
Yeah, go figure. So all right, I guess 4 will do for all that then. And they have 11 records, and of those records, I think the first 5 all were British silver.
Cool. That means they sold like 30 albums.
I think it's 60,000 or 30, maybe it's 30,000.
I think
and then 2 more were British silver after that. So a total of 7 silver records.
Yes, and they charted well. And
in the UK, I mean, like they're definitely definitively one of those groups that made it big in the UK and just did not, like, if we were British, we would probably be talking like about a band that was obviously an above average score, but because we're American, we're talking about a band that we're like trying to tell other people exists.
Yeah, basically.
And yeah, so there is definitely a wide disparity in the level of fame between different countries.
Man, I just didn't like the music.
Yeah, I liked it enough.
This is a music podcast, and I didn't like the music.
I liked it enough that I would definitely not necessarily give them a bump, but I wouldn't let them not stay flat on the music.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, I'm in the higher end of the 5s. 11 records, 7 silvers. That's 5 records above the average, plus, the country where they were popular.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was hovering around like a 5.5.
I was in the 7 to 8 range.
So let's give them a 5.6.
Instrumental talent,
come on.
Yeah,
it's okay. I mean, Siouxsie's okay throughout.
It's not a score I would go out of the 4s for, but that wasn't what was particularly impressive to me about this band. No. It was mostly like the uniqueness of their style that was impressive to me, if anything.
Yeah.
So I'm not going low, but I would be okay with like a 4.6, 4.7.
Let's give them a 4.7. That point one's for Budgie.
Yeah. Despite you not enjoying it, their songwriting was 1, unique, 2, influential, and 3, changed from album to album with distinct differences.
I agree.
That's an above average score to me. I think that
it's all the linchpins. It's all the linchpins. Now, here's the thing. I didn't like it.
Sure.
So that's a -8 automatically.
Okay. I didn't mind it. Which is
so that
positive
adds
8.
Another 4. No, you only didn't mind
it. +8, and then we just kind of give them the score we think they deserve.
Fine.
Opinions aside. which I would say is
Well, it's
probably in like probably in the high fives to a 6 again. That's where I'm at.
no.
I know you didn't like them, but we talked it through. We talked about all the different um, things that they had to hit on to score well here, and I think they hit on them. So fair is fair.
I'll give them a 5.9. I will not give them a 6.
Very good. Uh, Poetic talent, not as much though.
No, this is bad. I mean, it's not like trash can terrible bad,
No,
but it's not. I mean, at absolute best, it felt completely forgettable and moved into like bad.
sure.
Like I'm fine being in like the low fours,
I have no issue with that whatsoever.
like a 4.1.
Um, X Factor.
No, I mean, unlike with Pete Seeger, I feel like all of their legacy and influence was covered in their cultural impact.
All right, fair enough.
I think their biggest claim to fame is the at least to the American audience is the bands that came after them,
Sure. Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
that's
All right,
where they are.
so let's wrap things up with Nine Inch Nails then. Well, don't actually wrap anything with Nine Inch Nails.
Don't
That
wrap
would be a
anything
bad
in Nine Inch
idea.
Nails. What are you
No,
doing?
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Let's just talk about Nine Inch Nails.
end segment.
Nine Inch Nails, sometimes abbreviated as NIN.
Nin.
NIN. Is an American industrial rock band formed in Cleveland and
Great
was
for
for the
industry.
longest time widely known, I believe, as Trent Reznor's solo. He was the only member of the band,
Right.
and he would tour with other various artists and members. But he was the only consistent member. In 2016, that changed, and Atticus Ross joined the group.
Great name.
He had worked with Trent from about 2006 on with various projects, including Nine Inch Nails, and he is like a musician slash producer, audio engineer, and
Very good.
he works with Trent. Now, the three artists that we did, three albums that we did, are Pretty Hate Machine from 1989. Then we did The Downward Spiral from 1994. And then we did Ghost 6 Locusts, which came out in 2020.
Correct.
And I will say that was a free download as a solidarity for COVID-19. I
Nice.
was like, just have this.
That's nice.
Now, Nick, you get to talk about Pretty Hate Machine first.
All right, I'll do it. So it's a highly acclaimed record, like a lot of things from Nine Inch Nails. It's number 453 on the 500 greatest albums of all time list from Rolling Stone. And I knew the first song, which is Head Like a
Wow.
Hole. It started playing. I'm like, I've definitely heard this before.
Wow.
I know. Um, and it is definitely unique. His style is definitely revolutionary. I really strongly associate the whole industrial sound with Nine Inch Nails in particular and the sounds that he created. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it either. But
I am
here's what
flabbergasted
happened.
right now.
Here's what happened, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. Everything about the
Sure.
music is not what I'm interested in listening to.
Sure.
But just like I had been doing for quite a lot of this week, I was kind of listening to everything with the ear of a music historian, a musicologist, someone who's, like just kind of learning and taking in the way that the art has developed and changed and expanded into different styles over time. And that really helped me through this album because it just almost felt like an assignment, a study, something I could. It was a
Sure.
tool. It was, and it's the shortest of of their album. So it was like a 48-minute tool for me to learn about the development of industrial music, um, and how that became popular. I won't listen to any of the songs ever again, though, because I did not like the songs.
Sure.
And that's where I'm at.
So, you mentioned Trent and Nine Inch Nails as being the front runners and the creators of this style of music, and that they're who you think of when you think of it because of the things they did to push the genre forward. And it reminded me of a saying: just because you can do something, should you? And I think the answer is absolutely not. Because this is just really, really unfortunate to listen to. So, I listened to Nine Inch Nails last
Same.
because, one, that was the order we had them in. Two, I knew the name. And it was the only, like, I knew the name Pete Seeger, but I had no idea what his music was. So I listened in order, basically, this week.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, you know what? I've heard a couple Nine Inch Nails songs. I kind of know what I'm getting into. I didn't know what I was getting into. And I regret getting into it. And I just... This was a study in for me of, like, how much is too much? How much do I have to listen to that I just hate before I can just move on with my life? Like, so I got to Nine Inch Nails because of my work schedules this morning, because I didn't have classes this morning, so I could listen, and I knew the Nine Inch Nails had the longest albums, so I got to them this morning. Nick, I legitimately consider texting you, like, I don't think I can finish Nine Inch Nails and do the podcast today. Like, about halfway through this first album, I was like, maybe I just stop doing this. Maybe we just don't record it tonight. And I know we are live recording it. Maybe we just don't. I legitimately hated it. No part of it was A, good, B, instruments, or C, good.
Okay, then.
That is how I feel. If this was a theoretical study in industrial rock, I can now move on from that as a genre in my life.
Yeah.
And I feel comfortable with that. Now, I'll move into the downward spiral,
Right.
which is where I was emotionally heading
course.
into this album. And they say don't kick a man when he's down. But this album kicked me when I was down. It's 65 minutes long, Nick.
Yes,
it
is.
An hour and 5 minutes. And oh my God, is it not just awful? It's just so awful. The only good song is the closing track, and it's only good when Johnny Cash sings it. And I remember that. I remember hearing Hurt when Johnny Cash performed it and went, wow, this is great. And then I was like, it's a Nine Inch Nails cover. Cool. I'll listen to the original because I like to do that. And I went, oh, I'll just keep listening to the Johnny Cash version forever.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you.
But it is the best song on the album.
Okay.
Because the rest of the album is just bad. It's just bad. It's bad. There's literally a song called Piggy where, like, the lyrics are literally like, hey, Piggy. He says, hey, Piggy, and then just talks to a piggy. Hey, Piggy. What are we doing?
I don't know. I don't know what we're doing.
This album did contain the two songs that I knew by Nine Inch Nails, which is Hurt and Closer. Closer. I feel like maybe Nine Inch Nails is suffering a bit from my busy week.
You just fatigue.
But I don't care. It was so actively bad. I
Okay.
literally this morning was like, I was talking to Keith, who was listening, but also was one of my friends, and I was like, I have to go keep listening to music. And then I turned on this album and was legitimately, again, for the second time, like, do we have to do the episode today?
I understand.
Because, like, maybe they would have benefited from, like, 48 hours of me cooling myself off before talking about just how actively angry I was. Because, yet again, there just isn't music happening.
How do you really feel about this, though?
I just hated it. Although what
Okay.
I loved, I think my favorite part about the entire album. So there are instruments. I want to be clear.
Of course.
There is some guitar in it, and there's some drums, even though there's a lot of drum loops that just don't need to be happening. Um, there is a producer, Mark Flood Ellis, who is credited as the producer, but also he did the hi hat on Closer.
Good for
Just the
him.
hi hat. It's like you do the rest
Who
of it.
needs anything else?
I'm just gonna do the.
He can
So
just play
that's my
one.
favorite part. Other
Yeah.
than that, this was like for the amount of people that talk about how much they love Nine Inch Nails. I expected to at least get it. Even if
Sure.
I didn't like it, I expect like with Susie and the Banshees, I don't like it, but I get it.
Hmm.
I don't get it.
Okay. Well, I'll start by saying this album, at least in retrospect, has incredibly high reviews from every publication. It's universally acclaimed. Um, it really blew up. It sold millions and millions of copies, and it made nine and it
Before
really
you give your actual opinion, I need you to give me a pause. So
sure.
like say what you're gonna like finish what you're saying, but then like before you say your opinion, be like, and this is my opinion, and then pause.
Oh, sure, yeah. Um, and it just really made them huge. It really helped blow up Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, and this album was based on him listening to a lot of David Bowie and Pink Floyd, who are two of the greatest artists of all time. Now, I will say my opinion on the album. I hated it. I
I
hated it
felt that
so
coming, and I was like,
much.
that's gonna be a fun drop for this.
Yeah. So I went into it again knowing how I got through the first one, and I'm like, I'm just a music researcher, and this is going to be cool. Like, I'm doing research, and I'm thinking about the songs and the context of music history and how important and interesting it is. And the first song started, and it was so bad so immediately, like just completely unintelligible lyrics. You couldn't understand anything. It all sounded like it was horrible. It was the worst. I hated every single second of it, except for maybe a warm place, which was a little bit
Sure.
more of a reserved track. Um, I don't know. It was really bad. I don't want to even. You said so much about it. It sucked. It was really bad. I'm just gonna move on to Ghosts Six Locusts,
Yeah.
which is an album that I didn't even have to take notes for. Um, it is 83 minutes long, and it
Just
is
real quick,
yeah,
before you get any further than that,
of course,
the average album
right,
is in between 36 and 45 minutes long.
sure.
This is 83 minutes long.
It is.
All right,
And I'll tell
continue.
you, hands down, their best record. Hands down, the best record that we listened to by this group. It is 83 minutes of what is it's ambient noise, a little bit of music, and a few notes thrown in here and there, sound effects. It's the score for an 83-minute long horror film.
Yeah.
I don't know that that film has yet been made, but if you listen to this album, you're going to hear what is essentially the score of an hour and 20-minute horror film. That's what it is. It was fine to listen to. I didn't mind having it on in the background and going about my life. Um, and that's why that's their best music, because I
Yeah.
didn't mind it being in the background.
Uh, and here's the thing, I completely agree with you. What I equated it to, I did have the horror aspect of it. and I was like, it's like a mixture of a horror film or somebody leaving their phone microphone on as they move a music room between like classrooms. Like
Oh,
the music
interesting.
classroom is switching rooms over the
Right.
summer,
Hmm.
and so they're so because like random instruments are making a noise at times, like from
Right.
far away. So like yeah, oh like we're moving our glockenspiel, and then like oh
Hmm.
it dings once. Oh
Sure.
whoops, and that's what happened. That's the entire album.
That's it.
Here's what I'll say: if you had to give me that versus anything Nine Inch Nails has come out with before, I now realize that if that's what all of the Ghost, because this is Ghost 6, they released Ghost 1
Correct.
through 4, then Ghost 5, and then Ghost 6.
Right.
If that's what they all are, then I know there's at least some Nine Inch Nails albums that if you asked me, do you like Nine Inch Nails? I could go, I like some of their work.
Sure. Well, would you say that, or would you say I can listen to a few albums?
I would say, oh, I've listened to some of their stuff and not actively wanted to die.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Which maybe says all it needs to say.
I think it does. And now let's get these
Ghosts
final
1 through
grades.
4 is because that's one album.
Hmm.
Is 110 minutes long, dude.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Oh my
You want
gosh.
to listen to it?
No, I don't. I
Okay, fair
don't at
enough.
all. I don't and Ghost 5 is 70 minutes long. The short
Yeah,
one.
that all sounds right.
Just okay.
Okay.
Okay. Everything's fine.
Cultural impact.
Nine Inch
They're in the
Nails.
Rock and Roll of Fame
Yeah.
2020. They are number 94 on Rolling Stone's greatest list of 100 greatest artists of all time. Trent
Sure.
Reznor was named one of the most influential people of
Yeah.
1997 by Time.
Oh, of course.
Um,
Ah,
so, constant critical acclaim for the entire career, and v- a lot of importance in developing industrial music and all
yeah.
of the things that industrial music would lead to. So that's definitively some points here.
100% for sure.
They definitely suffer from the average person not knowing that much of their work a little bit. Um, but
I
it's still an above
legitimately
average score.
think I legitimately oh, wait, I legitimately think the average consumer probably has heard the Hurt cover more
More than anything else,
than
yeah.
a standard Nine Inch Nails song.
I would agree.
Because Nine Inch Nails doesn't get a ton of radio play.
No.
They're just like around.
Hmm.
But Hurt, I've
Or
heard
maybe
Hurt
they
on
got a lot
radio.
more when we were tiny little children. We just don't know about it.
Sure. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God I didn't hear
Um,
this as a young child.
so I don't know. I think it's probably another number in the sixes. I mean,
I'm sure it
if
is.
you're on the top 100 artist
Yeah,
lists,
I'm sure it is,
if
Nick.
you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if you're, you know,
Look, I'll give you a 6.3
revolutionary in a genre,
and feel dirty about it.
I'm glad that I could at least drag that much out of you. Now,
Okay, now 20 million records have been mistakenly bought by people.
that is correct. And that's 11 studio albums. So that sets them up to have the highest score of the day for us. But
Yeah,
it's also very bad to listen to, so we'll keep that in mind.
very bad to listen to.
It is definitely,
Actively very bad to listen to. I
yeah,
regret having listened to it. I,
yes,
in fact, wish I had a pair of Nine Inch Nails while listening to it because I would have put them in my ears.
very good for your thinking goo that you keep in your head.
Super good for
Is
the thinking goo.
Yeah. I don't know. I still think it has to be a solid number here because of the sales and the number of albums. But I could go down to like maybe a 6 because we've docked them for quality.
Yeah. Um, I guess we can do that. Let's do that.
Okay. And then we got
Just feels nasty.
instrumental talent.
It's bad. Okay, this is bad.
I didn't enjoy it. I mean,
Trent Reznor's not a good singer.
I felt like there were times when I was like, oh, maybe if he like tried, he could have been, but he actively
Sure,
tried to be bad instead.
sure. If I tried, I could be a juggler, but I'm not.
Right.
Like, if I really tried to do something, I could do
Sure.
something. But
Yeah. I mean, it's almost all programming and engineering
yes,
for almost all these songs. Like that's just what you're dealing with.
and
Um,
like not even really good
as a
at
general,
times. Like,
I'm
ugh,
those things are more of a songwriting skill than they are an instrumental skill. I just wouldn't put them here. So that leaves
yeah,
me with a not good score. I mean, how
yeah.
low do you want to go?
I mean, legitimately, man, the fact that not only is the quote unquote acoustic instruments, like the actual real instruments, not good,
Mm-hmm.
and the vocals not good, but the heavy inclusion of computerized instrumentation and again not good computerized because I've heard computers done well and you remember
Well, that's
I
the
know
thing.
you
That's what I'm saying. Like that production is just. I don't think it is something that we really factor in here as much as we factor it in with songwriting because even if we did, and it's like, oh, but they programmed this really great part like by hitting four keys on a MIDI keyboard and I'm supposed to be impressed that you can hit four keys on a MIDI keyboard. That's not, you
I
know what I mean? Like
understand.
that's not good instrumental talent. I don't care how good like if your claim to fame is like, look, I made this great composition and I took this one little keyboard that's an octave and I played like four different notes with one finger. I don't think you're a great keyboard player. I think you're a lousy keyboard player who can write songs. So I would give you a very low instrumental talent, but maybe a higher songwriting. That's what I'm saying here.
And
That's my point.
I do get what you are saying and I'm trying to reconcile that with what I'm feeling.
Sure.
So I'm gonna I firmly am thinking like a 3.
Done. Now, songwriting, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I did not like the compositions. You did not like the compositions. They are absolutely unique. They are absolutely groundbreaking. They are
Sure.
absolutely influential. This
Sure.
can't be a below average score to me, even though, to be clear, I did not like any of it.
I mean they're bad. They're like bad.
I mean, we actively hated it, but I think objectively, there's too much about this that was important to the development of music and what happened with compositions to not at least give the average score here. I think it would be doing a disservice to all of the millions of people who do enjoy that sound. Like, obviously, it's not
I
for us. This Nine Inch Nails is not going to be winning seasons. We're not going to be speaking their accolades, but I think the one service we give them is their songwriting was important enough to at least warrant our average score.
Here's the thing. We sit here on our pedestal, gazing at the masses below us,
Of course.
and we try to be objective. We try to claim science is
But we
behind what
don't.
we
I
do.
mean, it's not really.
But this is an opinion
I
podcast.
mean, of course. Obviously, at the end of the day, we're finding who we think is the greatest artist of all time, not who is
And
objectively. There's
just
no way to measure
God
that.
God damn, is my opinion just so bad about like it's just so
No,
bad
I
about
I
this.
agree. Like if it was like how much did I like the songwriting, I'd put a 1. But I'm just trying to throw a little bit of the objectivity and like at least recognize something that I hate. Like for instance, I hate Bruce Springsteen's singing voice, but I think he's a tremendous songwriter. You know what I mean? Like when
Right.
we do Springsteen on the
Right.
podcast, I'm not going to say, "Well, I don't like listening to his songs because I don't like his voice." I'm still going to be like, "Dude's an amazing songwriter, gets super high marks."
Right, but that's because he does something well.
I mean, I'd really struggle to put an artist that I think is this important to the history of music, specifically for the reason of the style that they developed in their compositions. Like this is the one spot where I think they have to between instrumental songwriting and poetic. This is the one thing that I thought in the song physically that they did right, or as close to right as
Look,
possible.
I will I will let you give a 5
Thank you.
but it makes my stomach hurt a little bit.
But you understand it's not because I love you. I feel like my reasoning was clear.
I get it.
And I'm not going to be there for Poetic.
No,
You're more than
Poetic.
welcome to rip that to shreds.
Here's what happened. Poetic is bad. But he wrote a very good song in Hurt. The lyrics in that song are very good, and he wrote the lyrics to that. Like,
Sure.
here's the thing. Trent Reznor has, in his lyrical ability, the ability to write both very good and very bad lyrics, as is witnessed by his entire work. And we did get to listen to one of 3 albums, which are the longest albums, which are entirely instrumental. So,
Sure.
like, that also exists. I don't want to. This is the only part that I don't want to throw him into the ground for,
Okay.
because I also think that there were legitimate moments. However, he did use the phrase "Hey Biggie" in a song.
All right. Point 1.
So I want to give him a 3.5.
You got it. And now I think X Factor is in order. I mean, Nine Inch Nails maybe didn't fully develop industrial rock by themselves. Like, it's something that had been going on, maybe, even vaguely related to some other, like, sort of like experimental music mixed with some of the things that maybe we talked about with Kraftwerk, with the implementation of a lot of synthesized and computerized music. There were other artists who were doing the things that would become industrial rock, but it really was like Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson who made it a thing that people had ever heard of. Like, they are the artists
really
that
all started in
the...
70. It really all started in 75 with Throbbing Gristle, though.
Okay.
That's a real band. That's a real industrial rock band. I said.
Believe you. But what I'm saying is, like, while
there's also
maybe
one
they
called
weren't the...
Revolting Cocks from 1985.
Nice.
They mean
while
the
they didn't necessarily invent it, Nine Inch Nails did popularize it, bring it to the mainstream. They are definitely one of the formative artists of the genre, even if there were people there a decade or two earlier, like putting some of the bricks down. Nine Inch Nails
There's one
made
called
it
Kidney
a house.
Thieves.
Well, I look forward to doing all those bands someday.
Oh, I don't.
Well, no, I don't either, really. So look, I've said everything I need to say. I think they should get some genre points in X Factor, like maybe 1 genre point in X Factor instead of 2.
Fine, I'll give them a point. If they win because of that point, I'm quitting the podcast.
They will not win because of that point, I promise.
Oh, that scares me, the way you said that. Okay, all right, it's fine. I'm ready.
Okay. I have final scores then, Patrick.
Score me, Nick.
Now, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a real question before I give scores. And maybe you'll see where I'm going with this or not. Did you think really hard about, like, the genre legacy X Factor points for Siouxsie and the Banshees and post-punk? Are you sure you don't want to give them anything?
I do.
For being post-punk pioneers?
You know what? They were post-punk pioneers. Let's give them 2 points.
Well, I'm not going to give them 2, but I was thinking like half a point.
Give them 4 points. Let's give them half a point.
Half a point. Okay. All right. I now have scores, Pat.
Good. I'm excited. I'm going to feel better
now. So, in last place this week.
You loser.
Is an exact tie between Siouxsie and the Banshees and Nine Inch Nails at 24.8.
Wow. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh, thank God.
Which means winning this week.
Oh, yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
It is Pete Seeger with the 29.4. So, yeah. So now we're at that point.
Exhale.
I mean, now it's up to you. Do we vote on who's officially the 3rd place versus 2nd place, or do you want to toss that to the Spotify?
So yeah. So
although I feel like last time this happened, we disagreed, and so it went to Spotify.
We did disagree. I feel like this time we don't disagree.
We do not disagree.
So here's what's going to happen. We're definitively making Nine Inch Nails third place unless everybody in chat right now says that we're wrong for doing that.
Fair enough.
If chat fully, and we're just going to continue ending the episode, and that'll be, if they disagree with us, I'll post that in the episode description as it comes
Fair
out.
enough.
So check the description if you disagree, and if there's nothing about it, that means everyone else agreed and you're wrong. But yeah, Nine Inch Nails was bad. Regret listening to it. Regret music existing.
Agreed. And you know what? Next week, come back and regret listening to Blur with us.
Okay, excited for Blur.
Woo! Are you that excited?
So excited. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thank you for hanging out as we got through that. I want to let you know we're at about an hour and 20, which means if instead of listening to this, you listened to Ghost 6 Locusts, you would be just about getting ready to wrap up.
Nice.
A whole podcast length. Thank you for picking us instead. And honestly, you're welcome for existing instead of that album. Even though it was the best of
their, yeah.
Now I'm gonna get ready to wrap us up here and tune us out. Again, like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Twitch. We stream every Thursday, and hopefully you enjoy that. Hopefully you are having a good summer, and hopefully you are having a great day.